And there we go. Okay. So we have attendees moving back to 0. Oh, here they come. Ooh. Welcome people who are just joining us. We'll start at 7 in 1 minute. We're just letting people in the door now. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Hi, I'm Gretchen Sable. I'm the Communications Director for LWV Upper Mississippi River Region. And I just wanted to welcome everybody here tonight. We are going to have some guests from the Nature Conservancy, and Kay Slama, our action chair, is going to talk all about that. But I'm going to talk just for a minute about League of Women Voters Upper Mississippi River Region, because there's something I wanted to show you. I've just shared my screen here, and what you see here is this is our webpage, lwvumrr.org, and we have a tab at the top called Past Program Videos. Every 2 months, give or take, we have a program, and those programs are recorded and available for later viewing. I have a table on this Past Program Videos page. In the table, you can do the YouTube link. You can link to the blog post for more information. And so there's lots of resources here for you. So I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to Kay so we can get started on the program. Kay?
Well, hi folks, and welcome. I'm Kay Slama, your Action Committee Chair for UMRR. I'm so pleased to talk tonight, introduce the Nature Conservancy program. The Nature Conservancy has set ambitious goals to transform how we conduct and influence conservation across the whole basin to ensure its long-term resilience for nature and people alike. We are developing projects, partnerships, and policies that protect essential lands, habitats, and waters, while deepening our understanding of the connections between people and place. This presentation will provide an overview of our Mississippi River Basin project, the Nature Conservancy's Mississippi River Basin project, and touch on select actions it's taking in Minnesota and elsewhere in the upper Mississippi River that contribute to a vibrant future for the Mississippi River Basin as a whole. So here are your presenters tonight. Steve Harrington is the Associate Director of Water for the Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota chapter of the Nature Conservancy. An aquatic ecologist with over 30 years experience in fish and stream ecology, Steve joined the Nature Conservancy's Florida program in 2004 and helped develop its first freshwater conservation program. In 2012, Steve joined the Missouri chapter and developed its first freshwater program, as well as directed its science initiatives until joining the Tri-State chapter in 2022. Steve has led and collaborated on a variety of freshwater initiatives across the U.S., including conservation planning, river restoration, dam removal, and fish passage, environmental flow development, outreach and education, and implementing nature-based solutions with measurable benefits and climate change resiliency. Our other presenter is Amy Crozier. Amy earned her bachelor's degree in biology at Kalamazoo College, where she studied plant-pollinator interactions prior to a habitat enhancement program. Then she jumped into the water world, where she served as an AmeriCorps member in the Maine Conservation Corps. She spent a year assessing the quality of streams and wetlands using plant and macroinvertebrate populations as bioindicators, then served a second year with a land trust, working with private landowners to reduce their nutrient loading through shoreline erosion control and habitat enhancement projects. Amy moved to Minnesota and joined the Nature Conservancy Tri-State chapter in June of 2023 and works as TNC's freshwater restoration technician. Her focus is building the partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Private Lands Partners for Fish and Wildlife program and increasing the joint capacity to restore wetlands in the Mississippi headwaters. Amy says that her favorite part of her job is getting to work with dedicated landowners who work to do their part in protecting our planet through habitat, water quality, and water storage. She's also proud that her grandmother has been a part of League of Women Voters for over 50 years and very involved in Jefferson County, Colorado, where they've finally got together a 0.5% sales tax to fund open and preserve open space in that county. And she grew up enjoying those open spaces and is pleased that she gets to continue that conservation work. So, Steve and Amy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kay, and thank you to everybody who's on the webinar now. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you so much for the invitation to talk about the Mississippi River Basin program and sort of focusing from broad scale to actually doing things and how we're making it better out there in nature and in our communities. So I'm going to, with no further ado, I'm going to share my screen here.
While you're doing that, Steve, I want to ask people to put their questions in the chat box.
So thanks again, everybody. For today's presentation, Amy and I are going to sort of do half and half. We're going to double team this one. I'm going to give an overview of the Mississippi River Basin program, what we do from top of the basin here in Minnesota all the way down to Louisiana, broad strokes, and we can get into details after the presentation. And Amy's going to get into the details about what we're doing here in Minnesota as one element of trying to make it better out there for people and for nature in the Mississippi River Basin. So a little bit about us. We're the Nature Conservancy. We're the largest, I think we're the largest environmental organization on the planet. Lots of folks work with us. There's 4,500 folks or so. And just a little bit about us. There's our mission. Conserve lands and waters on which all life depends. A pretty ambitious mission. And really we want to be able to do this, understanding that people are part of nature, people are part of this planet, and what we do is going to affect what birds we care about, the wetlands that we care about, we're going to talk about soon, and as well as what we do in generally as we live our lives and try to make it better out there for us and for nature. We've got some priorities here. These are sort of a summary of our main priorities. Climate change is real and we need to address it. We are undergoing a climate crisis. We're undergoing a worldwide biodiversity crisis. By protecting the lands and waters, thinking about how we work in cities, as well as food and water sustainably, where we're able to coexist and do better than coexist, but also thrive. That's sort of the gist of our main priorities. And a little bit more about us. Again, we're pretty big, 80 countries across the world. I'm one of the 400 plus scientists that's on our team, and really proud to be working for TNC for these last 20 years or so, and just the last year and a half or 2 years up here for our Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota chapter. So
Excuse me, Steve. I'm going to thank you for that introduction and say that I misspoke. Instead of putting questions in chat, which apparently you don't have, put your questions in Q&A, in the Q&A box. Thank you, folks.
Great. Thanks, Kay. So let's talk about our Mississippi River Basin program. I'm going to start off by talking about the goals and then back up a little bit and tell you sort of how we got here and why we care about this. You're looking at the goals here. As the Nature Conservancy, we wanted to find a way to address massive scale across continental North America challenges that we have with nutrient pollution and loss of biodiversity within the Mississippi River Basin that manifests as it goes from the 31 states all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, which has resulted in a extraordinarily large dead zone. by doing things here, even in the headwaters of the Mississippi, here in Minnesota, we can have effects that reverberate downstream, particularly if we treat this as a system and not just small pieces. How do we integrate across that so that we can get nitrogen and phosphorus reductions across the basin in these coming years? A big part of that are like nature's kidneys, floodplains and wetlands. We'd like to try to protect and restore 2 million acres of those in these coming 5 years, as well as just addressing what's out there in the I states and elsewhere. Agriculture is a big part of not just feeding us as a nation and feeding the world, but also the responsibility we have. How can we do better? How can we work with agriculture to get better water outcomes, as well as live sustainably and reduce the dead zone, reduce green water in our own water courses, etc. And we're not doing this capriciously or arbitrarily. We have a lot of scientists on our team. Again, I'm one of them. We've been working with folks from U.S. Geological Survey, some of their mapping programs here, and states, federal agencies, other entities like you folks, the Mississippi River Basin Association, etc., to understand the problem. And by looking at that problem at scale, like this mapper of where, in this case, where total phosphorus, where those high concentrations are, the darker areas, how we can eventually address these challenges. So using real data, real science to inform the decisions that we make, and thinking, how do we work across so many borders effectively? So that's sort of how we've organized ourselves. Again, this is just a little bit behind the curtain of how we're trying to work, not just in state by state by state, which is a challenge in the Mississippi River Basin in general for system level management. We don't have a basin compact across multiple states or across multiple countries, like some other basins have, either here or in other parts of the world. In our case, we have to figure out how we piece this together on our end so that we have strong leadership, so that we left hands and right hands are not just knowing what they're doing, but also working collectively. And then being able to align our priorities, align funding, and go for big wins with for some of the key folks you see here, and then folks that aren't on here, like myself, Amy, people from Kansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, you name it. We're all working together collaboratively to see where we can find money, where we can move policies, politics to make a difference in the basin for better water outcomes for us and for people and for nature. That's how we're doing it. So these are sort of the three-legged stool of how we're looking to try to get that system level change. The first part is that recruiting champions and advisors. One of the things we can do as a really large organization is we can use our largeness to our leverage. Because we are a big organization, because we are known to entities from Washington, D.C. down to the rural and the county level, we can have conversations that a lot of smaller entities can't. So being able to engage large landowners, large corporations when needed, etc., and then going to the deep bench of folks who are emeritus professors, to leaders in industry, etc., to help be a part of our team and advise and help champion the work that we do. And we've done that over these some odd years. To take a step back, we have been working in the Upper Mississippi River Basin sort of collectively since about, I want to say it was about 2012-ish when we were originally a Upper Mississippi River program. It was around 2016 or so where we said, you know what, we need to make this basin wide. So that just gives you an idea. It's been over 10 years since we've been aligning. We've moved millions of dollars, helped move things forward. That's part of that aligning funding. Corporations, state taxes, like in the state of Missouri, H2 Ohio, things like that, which help move money for environmental restoration for improving water quality. And that gets us to targeting places. Eventually, we can wave our hands around and say that we're talking to this person, we're raising this money, but eventually you got to do something with it. You've got to get out there and actually make a difference and make things better. And that's going to be Amy's portion of the discussion here. So here's part of our key strategies across the basin. Again, I touched on a few of these. How do we collaborate internally? Some of this is internal. You've got a big entity like us, and with our own leadership at the state level, our own fiefdoms, our own connections to where movers and shakers are. So being able to work internally effectively, that's been a big challenge, and I think we've done pretty darn well. We're in a glide path now for some odd years in doing that. And then rallying those other influencers. But here's where, again, where it hits the road. Two of the big things that we really need to address, if we're going to move the needle on river conservation, reducing nutrients, and improving the Gulf of Mexico and everything in between, have to address agriculture. How do we see ourselves for better agricultural outcomes and not making the assumptions that we're always doing everything perfectly? And a big part of that are reconnecting floodplains and restoring natural wetlands. That's a big part that manifests in the lower portion of the system. Think Boot Heel, Missouri, all the way down through Arkansas, the Delta of Mississippi into Louisiana. But there's plenty that we do in Iowa, Illinois, and up here in Minnesota too, that really connect with, that are a through line of the type of strategies we want to employ, regardless if we're wearing a Louisiana hat or a Minnesota hat. And so these are three of the big pillars that we focus on. And these are ag-related to a degree. That bottom one is less so. An infield strategy. We would like to be able to deal with the infield row crops and get appropriate infield best management practice out there, like cover crops that you see one field not cover crop, the other field with cover crops, which not only absorbs things like nutrients, but also keeps our land in place. It helps maintain soil so they don't wash away. A big one, particularly with the spectrum of climate change, is edge of field strategies. As we get more extreme weather, as we've seen in the Midwest, and as we see down even in Florida right now, those systems in the St. Johns River Basin that are going to get hammered with Milton coming through, edge of field, so those water bodies are those are the things that can help reduce the rate of change as things are changing rapidly with the changing climate. How do we start inculcating that more so with agriculture? Not everybody has an edge of field or a buffer law like the state of Minnesota, but perhaps that's something to think about into the future where we can. And then importantly, one of the big things that can really move the needle for biodiversity, for nutrient and sediment reduction, carbon sequestration, floodplains and wetlands. And we aim to try to protect, enhance, and restore 2 million acres by 2030. And we're on our way, particularly with some of our work in the South. Just a little touch on a little bit here. An example of our infield strategies, supply chains. Where can we work in supply chains to lead to that nutrient reduction? We work with row crop collaboratives. Here we are as an environmental NGO working with hardcore row cropping retailers, etc., and getting those green solutions, nature-based solutions into the supply chains, and hopefully throughout, from Iowa across the I-states, etc. Another one is for our nutrient stewardship. We still apply a lot of nutrients on the ground for corn and soy. How can we do that better so that we're just not broadcasting? Can we do less? Can we be more targeted? Can we use the right things at the right time at the right rate, etc.? Those the principles of the 4R. We do not do that perfectly elsewhere. By working with retailers, we can move that needle and make sure that the farmer out there is getting good technology and doing the same. So that's less nutrients on the ground, i.e. less into our water bodies. And we do a lot with engaging the state and federal agencies and programs, from nutrient reduction plans, and outside of this, even policies. I mentioned H2 Ohio. That was in 2019. I think Governor DeWine passed that, inculcating, or not inculcating, but moving about $200 million a year-ish or so, at least 178 a year, for practices out there to improve water quality so you don't have massive nutrient balloons in Lake Erie, like we saw in Toledo some odd years ago. Here's more of that edge of field stuff. There's a lot of ag things that we can do, and even beyond agricultural practices. vegetated buffers that you see on the left here, to prairie strips, which you see more toward the right, where you can have not just a sea of corn, but perhaps in between those, having some things for pollinators, et cetera, to be able to inhabit. And then, as you see there on the right, part of that is wetlands too. How is that part of the solutions? How can we drive that with these entities that we're working with that haven't seen a lot of these practices and are less familiar? That's where we can work with our deep bench and others in this space, investing in the science and technology, creating a monitoring system with USGS. We're funding that now throughout the whole basin so we can better track the effects of our practices. And then a big part is communicating. It doesn't have to just be blood and guts agriculture. We can be regenerative the way that other entities are and the way that other states, other countries have tried to veer toward to live more sustainably with agriculture. And edge of field practices are a big part of that. That's a place where we as the Nature Conservancy innovate. That's a place where a lot of biodiversity is found. And it's also that crucial integration of land and water that creates that climate resilience in real time. And that brings us to floodplains and wetlands. It's the Atchafalaya down in Louisiana, the bottom end of the system. Wetlands are awesome. Floodplains are really a big deal. Even up here in where we don't have not nearly expansive the wetlands as we do certainly in the lower portion of the system, but boy, we sure have them, and they do real work for us as our filters, the sponges. They really do reduce nutrient pollution. You can get 40–50% total nitrogen and total phosphorus reduction from floodplain and wetland restoration work. Sediment reduction as well into our water bodies, another important non-point source pollutant. Real benefits of carbon sequestration, that is a real thing, which matters in a changing climate. Water storage, more of these that you have on the landscape, the better resilience and buffering you can have for these massive storms that are moving through and increasing in intensity, particularly in areas where we've tiled the heck out of them. Places like Iowa, even Minnesota, have been increasing their tile use. These are the drainage tiles that drain farmlands that go directly to streams. What if we intercept those with wetlands? What if we slow it down with water storage? It can make a difference. We can calculate that. And can't underscore enough the biodiversity benefits. You're getting all these positive things for clean water, but also you're getting reptiles, amphibians, birds, fishes, dragonfly, rare dragonflies, a suite of things, helping get things off the endangered species list even. Wetlands are a really terrific biodiversity and clean water accelerator. So that's part of what we're looking to do here, but it's not all great out there. Even our most recent assessment nationwide is showing we're still losing wetlands, even with the laws we have on the books, and they're not comprehensive. I'll touch on that in a second. We have been consistently losing wetlands in this country. In the last 10 years, substantial wetland loss nationwide. And that is made more challenging because of changes in policy nationwide for the Clean Water Act. You may be aware of the decision of EPA versus Sackett that was decided in May of 2023. Essentially, it reduced the what's a good way of putting it without being too pejorative about it? It reduced the federal government's ability to regulate wetlands dramatically. Folks call it a sea change in wetland protections nationwide. And what here you see are those places that don't have better than federal laws. For example, like Nebraska, place I used to work for 10 years in Missouri. Lots of wetlands there, highly imperiled. Now is a great time to be thinking about what can we do in our floodplains and wetlands for all the climate resilience, et cetera, when we've got some stuff stacked against us right now from the federal end of things. And even in a wetland-rich place like Minnesota, that in the north has coniferous and peatland wetlands, has a variety of where I'm at in the Minneapolis area of deciduous forests and forested wetlands and lakes, and the prairie potholes. Lots of this stuff's been converted by agriculture over the years. So even in a place like Minnesota, I think we went from something like, what were we at? Somewhere around 20 some odd million acres of wetlands before conversion till I think we're down now to about 10.5 million acres. So we've lost even in a place like this, which is, I think, fourth in the country, fourth or fifth behind Alaska and Florida and a few other and another one. We've still lost quite a lot, but we can make a difference, and we're working on making that difference. Every time, everything that we do on the ground can manifest in better outcomes downstream. And that's where I'm pleased to introduce Amy Kazir to talk about our wetland restoration work in Minnesota, where we're taking those concepts of, now that you have the big dollar sources, now that you've built partnerships, now that you've built trust, what can we do to actually make a difference out there in the field? Amy?
Hi, thanks, Steve. I'm actually gonna request control so I don't have to ask you to advance my slides, and we'll see if that works.
Sure, if you can. I'm not sure how to do it on my end. Oh, here we go. Approve. There you go.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to, like Steve said, be talking about some of the wetland restoration work that we've been doing in the Mississippi headwaters. And I'm going to start by showcasing a unique wetland that you can see on this map here. It's that little red dot. And our Mississippi headwaters area is in that, that bigger blue watershed. So first, I'll talk about this wetland restoration project and then talk about the ways that we're scaling up as a tri-state chapter to implement more restorations across the landscape. Sorry about that. All right. So this is Cold Spring Fen. It was ditched in the 1950s to try to grow crops. And then when that didn't work, graze, and that also didn't work. However, it was because it drained the peatlands, the fen, it no longer functioned like a healthy wetland. And here you can see where the ditch completely bypasses the wetland and means that all of the runoff in the watershed goes straight to the Sauk River, which is just 14 miles upstream of the Mississippi River. All right. And I just want to show, what is in that watershed. It's a lot of land that's been converted into agriculture use. And so before we did our wetland restoration, all of that was not being filtered out, having that last stopgap right before entering a tributary to the Mississippi. And one of my favorite facts about how this wetland restoration project came to be, oops, we're going ahead. It was a local ecologist for the Department of Natural Resources noticed it and approached the landowners. So it wasn't our program to begin with, and that's how this conservation restoration work is happening in our landscape. It takes so many different people to come together. This ecologist approached the landowners and asked if they'd be interested in putting it into protective easement. And then everyone else came on board to make the restoration happen. And that's where we came in. So first off, it was this degraded peatlands that had been overtaken by a variety of invasive species. And we put a lot of effort into removing them by hand, lots of buckthorn, and we did some post-management of those removals with prescribed burning. We even had some goats to address any of that new growth after removal. And then following that, now that we'd gotten rid of the invasive species, we planted a wide variety of native trees, over 700. And then additionally, some more seeding, all, now that they had the chance to thrive without having to compete with those invasive plants. And then we also had to address the hydrology that had been, that had been impacted by the ditching done decades earlier. So one of our partners was an incredible engineer for some soil and water conservation districts in the area. And we ended up diverting water from the ditch and letting that re-wet this plain, this terrace along the Sauk River. And, typically we ditch or we plug the ditches for these drained wetlands. However, that wasn't a possibility with this site because it would have flooded out the farm field to the east of this property. And so this is also a wonderful example of how we can still work in concert with people in our landscape. Just we recognize that development is a part of our world now, and if finding ways to mitigate it and work together with all the different people who are invested in this landscape and all the various uses and benefits that we can have from it. So we diverted water from the ditch to re-wet this area. We created these natural swales that we could find from historical imagery, had been filled in over the decades, and carved them out, created shallow ponds to increase habitat diversity, and also really give that chance for the water to be filtered for the nitrogen and phosphorus pollutants to be filtered out. And with re-wetting the area, we also, that meant that it stopped a lot of decomposition of plant material, which meant it was now functioning as a peatland should, and acting as a carbon sink. So our hydrologic restoration was a success. We measured that the water table had been raised 3 feet with our efforts. Just a number. We estimated that 240 acre feet of water is filters through this wetland, which is once a year, which is the equivalent of 117 Olympic swimming pools, just for some reference, which greatly reduces the nitrate that enters into the Sauk River right downstream. So that's just one wetland, and it was, it's an incredible project, and I love how many people came together to come and make it happen. However, like Steve mentioned, we have these really, really incredible goals that we're trying to reach for 2030. And our chapter recognized that we need to scale up the amount of restorations that we're doing in our area. And so we have partnered with a U.S. Fish and Wildlife program called the Partners for Fish and Wildlife. And they focus on working with private landowners to restore wetlands and prairies. And our particular partnership, based in the Mississippi headwaters, does some really incredible work. But the biggest benefit is that these biologists that we work with are members of the community, and they have that local knowledge and that reputation, where landowners trust them with their land, because we're asking to change it. We're asking to restore it to what it used to be, but that amount of trust really takes some time, and we have been incredible. They've been incredible partners with us and letting us advance the wetland restoration that we're all doing together. So our formalized partnership is just over a year old, and we have already accomplished so much just in that time. This is a map that shows the 39 wetland restorations completed just in the year of 2023, our first formal year of partnership. And while, you know, it's 39 wetlands, over 200 acres, it's, you know, it's been, let's see, sorry, I have the numbers. You know, approximately 5,000 pounds of nitrogen were removed, over 300 pounds of phosphorus, and in total of nearly 5,000 tons of carbon stored with those wetland restoration work. However, my favorite part about this map is that it really shows the way these projects grow and get added to. So you'll notice they're all clumped together. And that's because we're approached usually just by one person who, you know, noticed that, you know, the pond on their land is, you know, there's no standing water anymore. You know, when they were a kid, they would hunt it with their family, and these people see the changes in our environment, and then they want to do something, and they have the ability to do it, especially with all of these incredible partners coming together. So we work with the landowner, and we scrape back the non-native sediment. We remove all the invasive species, all those invasive cattails that get rid of all of the standing water, and you know, really limit the benefits that a wetland can provide to, you know, from a nutrient reduction standpoint and a habitat standpoint. And then his neighbor sees that, and he wants the same thing, and then his cousin wants the same thing, and suddenly they're multiplying across the landscape. So this is just an example of just one. This is a beaver dam recreation. You know, we're resetting the hydrology, and in this picture you can see all the different partners that are, you know, essential to this work. We have a contractor who is learning ecological systems and processes by just nature of being able to be a skilled worker here. We have our fish and wildlife biologists, we have a landowner, and we have his neighbor, and they're all coming together, and an SW Soil and Water Conservation District technician, who are all essential to make it happen. So yeah, this partnership, it really addresses those shared goals that Steve talked about earlier, as far as our, you know, addressing the impacts of, you know, of climate change, increasing water storage, you know, those are, and increasing biodiversity. You know, we found this incredible overlap with these partners, and we're just kind of getting started. And it's really incredible to think about the places that we can go. I just want to take a second to highlight some of the biodiversity benefits that have been realized. All these photos have been taken on these wetland restoration projects. So the standing water that's now cleared because of the invasive cattail removal is excellent habitat for migratory birds. Then as you move to the edges of the wetland where there's emergent vegetation, it's places for secretive marsh birds to hunt. And then on the wetland fringe where you find your floral resources, there's, you know, it's a wealth of opportunity for pollinators. And then even as we venture into the uplands, that's, you know, it's utilized by so many other critters. And you'll find deer in a lot of these wetland areas, and, you know, deers will fawn in the spring just right next to the wetland. And it's incredibly rewarding to be able to get to see the impact, even just a year after some of these restorations have been placed in the landscape. So I just walked through kind of what a lot of these wetlands look like, going from the center of the standing water out to the edges. And you know, we have that across, 5 or 6 counties, and we're doing, anywhere from 40 to 80 a year, and we're hoping to, with our program, grow to even 100 wetland restorations every year. And that's, increasing the biodiversity, the connectivity when you have these implemented across the landscape. But it's also the water storage that you get out of that. I mean, we've all heard just how critical, especially in the recent weeks, how critical water storage is for us being, us living safely in our landscape. And that's also contributing to the nutrient reduction. It's just multiplied more and more as we can continue to filter throughout every watershed. There's a lot of emphasis put on wetland restorations near streams and rivers, and of course, we want to catch it, just like we did with Cold Spring Fen. However, if we can do it across the entire watershed, that's going to help reduce the burden on each and every one. So, I just wanted to highlight all these wetlands that we've seen across just the Mississippi headwaters that are slowly really starting to make a difference. And, one of the things that we're just getting off the ground with our partnership is, some post-restoration monitoring to inform how we do these wetland restorations. I mean, if you look at the history of how restorations have improved in the last 4 decades, they're pretty incredible. And so we can always continue to learn. And so we want to help these be more effective and more cost effective. So we're monitoring the water table levels and our our native vegetation resurgence across a variety of different types of wetlands. And that's, it's just the beginning, and it's a really incredible partnership and team to be a part of. We're really shaping the landscape to help return it back to, how it used to behave and act, and keep everyone healthy and living intentionally in our landscape.
Yeah. And when we think about it from scale, and that's, we've got folks from 5 states here on this call. We work with the Corps of Engineers. We work with other federal entities. We work across the states. But just to focus on Fish and Wildlife Service for a second, they have jurisdiction over threatened and endangered species. That's one of the things they do. They also run the refuge system. So the stuff that we're doing, Amy, about how many landowners are waiting for this in Minnesota from that one person?
From just one Fish and Wildlife Partners biologist, he has a wait list of about 200 landowners ready and willing. And that's really hard to find. Willing landowners, I think, one of the hardest parts when it comes to wetland restoration. And we've got a line out the door that we don't know when we'll see the end of. And it'll just keep growing.
So part of what we're working on now is with Region 3 Fish and Wildlife. So we've got all this potential in Minnesota. They have Region 3 Fish and Wildlife covers Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio. All of those programs have similar biologists with connections. As Amy said, this is where the rubber hits the road on the ground. What we're doing here has a strong influence on what Region 3 wants to do in the other states. They have the connections, but they don't have the funds. They don't have a partner like us to be a puzzle piece to help find funds, move things forward, and actually enact these things. And the refuge system is the same. We're let's see, the middle Mississippi is being expanded, the refuge, by about 90,000 acres between Missouri and Illinois. That's happening right now, or that's starting right now as part of the refuge expansion. How do we work with that? How do we enable that? How do we work with landowners to be engaged and work with easements? Thinking scale. Eventually, we have to do something on the ground. And Amy's example here is how we're thinking scale-wise in one aspect across the different things that we do across the basin. So thanks very much for having us, and would love to talk to everyone or answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, both Steve and Amy. I think that's been really interesting, the way that you're looking at how we can conserve wetlands and even get them back. We've got some questions here, so I'm going to read them to you and ask you to comment on them, please. One person asked about these wetlands. Has there been a reappearance of beavers?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, and working with nature, working with nature's engineer, famously the beaver, that's part of the tools in the toolbox. When we think restoration, oftentimes we think, and Amy showed that, complicated engineering designs, really having to like spending a lot of money to get those things implemented. You can also use nature depending. And that's part of what we're doing and others on the landscape have been doing, looking at low-tech solution on these landscapes, like actually doing things that make beaver want to adopt your wetland. Amy, can you tell them a little bit about one of the projects that you were doing for that? And that this is happening across the Midwest and in the West.
Yeah, I'll just say that, I had a picture of a beaver dam recreation site. And so, we find a natural pinch point of where a beaver, in a lot of likelihoods, had dammed that area or would have. And then we'll find, even just in a couple of weeks, if not a year later, that beavers have added on to that dam and have increased, this wetland. And that's both, a testament to the food resources that are then available that they can access. I don't know, Steve, if you also wanted to talk about any of the work done in South Dakota.
Yeah, also Mississippi River Basin drainage. If you think about it, what we're even out west, by doing some things that help get more beaver on the landscape, it's a great question. How do we work with nature when it's, we don't have Department of Defense budgets out there to do the type of work that we do. The agencies don't like Fish and Wildlife, NOAA, us. So what are we going to do? How do we be smart and work with science and nature to do it? Out west in these arid areas, doing the things like Amy just talked about, creating some structures that slow water down, that beaver in the area will move into and adopt, like our own science shows, has helped raise the water levels out in dry, arid western South Dakota, in those areas that are getting strongly impacted by climate change. Those are really important things for us, even in our agricultural end of things, which are, you can actually pay for creating structures through agricultural programs that enhance beavers, that get beaver on the landscape. We got that done in Missouri, Kansas has it on the books, etc. So that's another thing that has been in the last 10, 15 years, another one of the arrows in our quiver of what we can do in conservation creatively to help biodiversity, but also help our drought and the water crises we face in a lot of the driest areas of the country.
I hear it also helps prevent the wildfires. If you get beavers, you get those green areas that basically cut off the wildfires there.
It can be natural fire breaks, particularly before something gets to the intensity that it rips across a landscape. Yeah.
Another question concerns the potential for an interstate compact of all states in the Mississippi River watershed, like the Great Lakes Compact or the Delaware River Compact, and says, there's an article about this by John Stack, who's a JD candidate for Minnesota Law School. And he says this has been historically supported by the Supreme Court, the interstate compact approach. So how difficult would it be to get all like-minded environmental organizations and other sympathetic organizations to push this agenda if the politicians can't get it done? Could the Nature Conservancy take the lead on this?
Whoever put this in there, you're spot on. If we could get an interstate compact, a la what they have in the Great Lakes, that would be a huge, I sort of alluded to it about across countries because Canada's part of the Great Lakes Compact. That would be a massive step in the right direction, a huge step in the right direction for full system governance. It is really challenging. The key word, if I got that right, was like-minded. It's tough. You're running through the I-states, you're running through areas where you have cultures and politics that don't align in the same way that perhaps they do with the threats the Great Lakes have had from the opening of the Welland Canal and the collapse of those ecosystems, zebra mussels in recent times. It's challenging, and that is absolutely something that we have been striving toward. I'll let you in, and you guys probably are aware of this because UMRBA thinks about it. Other folks have been efforting toward it. We have been trying to try to continue to raise this as a potential endpoint, not endpoint per se, but something to strive toward for years now. It's just really challenging to find the political will for it. We are absolutely doing that. We have these background discussions with folks. It continues to be a discussion item, and would love to hear from you guys about what your thoughts are and how we might do that, how we might collaborate toward that, and get us there. If we had something like that, it would be a coup for the river, and frankly for the people around it, a la the way the Great Lakes Compact has been in these years since it was established.
I wonder if the Nature Conservancy has been doing anything to help with the karst areas that are along the Mississippi and a number of our UMRR states.
We're gonna start taking it. We've been doing it sort of like a state by state approach, mostly. And Amy, jump on in here, although I know you're a little bit new with some of this stuff. But some of our karsty areas like Kentucky, Florida's out of the basin. Certainly in Minnesota with the driftless area across the 4 states, Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, Arkansas with when you have the Ozarks down there, even the Ouachitas to a degree. Those have been typically handled by the states, but folks like myself and others sort of made a pitch to our broader organization to say we need to be addressing these things more broadly. We need to be raising awareness more broadly and try to take a Mississippi River Basin-esque type of an approach. So I am proud to say that for our area, our Great Plains Division, which essentially covers from North Dakota, Minnesota, all the way down to Texas, we have made the interior highlands, that's the Ozarks and Ouachitas, predominantly in Missouri and in Arkansas, as well as, importantly in our neck of the woods, the driftless area, as regional priorities. So what does that mean? That means bigger attention from bigger funding donors for bigger asks, for more money to collaborate across 4 states. And hopefully what we'd like to try to do, particularly in the realm of protection and education around karst resources is huge. People understand that they're living on a spongy land, that what you put on the ground can hit that water pretty quickly, and is very, the sensitivities around that. We're starting to think about that at scale finally, and how we work with partners on this is going to be how we succeed on in the future. Places like the driftless, there's a lot of protection energy in there for folks who want to do land protection in Joe Davies County, Illinois, extreme northwest Illinois, gorgeous area, in Decatur Decorah, Iowa, to the Kickapoo drainage out in Wisconsin, and then obviously here in Minnesota with the driftless for the Root River and others. We're finally getting organized around it. In addition to the on the ground stuff, I think protection and education could be key pillars in protecting these karst areas in the near term and in the long term.
And here's a question about education. I know that both of our organizations, that's one thing we have in common, is we try and educate people about wetland issues and about Mississippi River issues. I've heard that fens and bogs can sequester many times more carbon than an equivalent amount of forest. And we always think of forest as the big sequestering agencies. So how can we better educate people about the value of wetlands in managing climate change? Got any ideas more than you're already implementing?
I'd defer to you, Amy. You've been really in there with folks on this exact topic.
I'm glad you brought up just how incredible peatlands are when it comes to sequestering carbon. I believe, peatlands take up 3% of the Earth's land cover, and they sequester 30% of our carbon. So they're incredible, and Minnesota's pretty lucky in that, of the lower 48 states, that we have the greatest amount of peatlands. I'll say, I think we've really been picking up speed in the last, even just the last few years. We have a peatlands team on, in our chapter, and they are about ready to release, a book on how to, Steve, please correct me if I misspeak here, about how to manage and restore them. And so we're gaining a lot of traction. I will say, while, the peatlands that I work with for our wetland restoration are certainly, they're not as common as some of our others. But, that's one of my favorite parts of my job is seeing how information grows in small communities where they all know each other and they all talk to each other. And when one person has a peatland and they start talking about it, and I'm able to just spend an afternoon with them while the restoration's taking place, then everybody else in the town knows in the next couple of weeks. So the grassroots method really does make a difference, especially in a place where all these peatlands are in a lot, it's in the landscape where people have the power over them, that they're a lot of times the people who are most critical.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, have conversations with League of Women Voters after our chat today about your guys' ideas as well. Just the tenor out there is different now than it was 20, 30 years ago. So how do we strike that hot iron? How do we get more of this stuff, keep raising awareness about the benefits of things like wetlands through education? We're thinking about starting a center at the University of Minnesota around wetlands just for this purpose. One of our wetland team members who works with Amy and myself. We've got some other ideas too, but would love to hear your guys' thoughts as well.
I don't quite know how to facilitate that kind of meeting, but let's keep in touch and see if we can do that. Maybe invite everybody who's interested and has listened and seen your presentation here. That was going to be my last question, is how do you see the Nature Conservancy and Upper Mississippi River Region collaborating in our actions to manage water issues? I know certainly you're probably not any more in favor than we are of other states coming and grabbing Mississippi River water and piping it out into the desert.
A poor solution to climate change. Yeah, it'd be great to just discuss what our strengths are, what ideas we may have that might be in common. Hey, when we spoke with Gretchen before we started our seminar today, we chatted a little bit about the potential about moving policies forward that protect our water resources, like replicating or replicating the Wetland Conservation Act that we have here in Minnesota. Wisconsin sure could use that. They've got an incredible number of wetlands, 90% of which are do not have the protections they did prior after the Supreme Court ruling last May in the Sackett decision. Means we can go build a subdivision there and be held harmless without any and just destroy the wetlands we want, unless we do perhaps move some good policies forward. And we talked about education as well. I think those are really good near-term things that we could talk about and just have some conversations and see what arises.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Amy, for the thoughts that you've given us and the beginning maybe that we've made in working together. I appreciate you joining our meeting and telling us so much about what the Nature Conservancy is doing.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.